continuing on the idea of using this dual sequencer, there's a link in the description below to the previous videos. And in those videos, use the dual sequencer using Sonic Pi's synth engine. So as you can see on screen, I've basically got Sonic Pi sitting next to Ableton Live. So the name of the game here, now I'm just going to mute these off and direct your attention to this first channel. So we're going to send the MIDI messages from Sonic Pi, and they're going to go to Ableton. Now, the way that these are getting through to Ableton is via the IAC bus driver. So that's been enabled in Ableton. Let me get the preferences out here. So I've got it also as a kind of a control surface, and we also have it as a as a MIDI device. You have it down here. Almost everything in terms of the code is the same, except that instead of using play, which is the way of triggering Sonic Pi's synth engine, we're using the MIDI commands here. So I've got a MIDI all notes off at the beginning because sometimes the MIDI notes get a bit stuck. Now, I'm not too sure whether that's me or the communications sort of protocols. So I'm just going to accept that that's part of the fate of doing these sorts of things. It's not too experimental, but I think you get the drift. So we have a named port, the IAC bus driver 1, and then in this command here, MIDI notes, or all MIDI notes off, basically. The MIDI note to play is down here, so you can see it looks a bit, it's pretty much the same as the previous one, but we can see that we have a MIDI note on, a reference to a note that needs to be played. Again, watch the other video to get that. A MIDI channel, channel 1, a velocity ring. So if you remember, if you've watched the other video, you would have seen where we were using the FM synth and using the divisor. So this is a part of the idea of something similar to the divisor. Obviously, if we move from this idea, we move towards MIDI control changes, then that will give us some other dimensions, but we won't do that right now. We'll just keep it simple. The two different types of sequencer, and then a named port, a sleep value, and then a MIDI note off. So here we're basically recycling the same note number and then basically telling it to turn it off. I'm not entirely sure that all of the messages get through all of the time, but they tend to work. Now, the thing to understand here is that neither of these, Sonic Pi nor Ableton, are actually synchronized together. So I start it in Sonic Pi and then it turns up in Ableton, and you'll be able to see it on the mix channels here. And I've got Ableton set to 91 BPM, so that's for all of like the delay effects and stuff. But in reality, the transport is not going to be running. They're not in sync together. Of course, if we wanted to capture it, then we would have the transport running, and maybe we would use the resample. But again, we're not going to do that today. We're just going to look at this as an idea. And that's basically it, really. So now let's sort of have a listen to what's going on. That's pretty good. It's pretty successful. What we have up here in terms of setting up Ableton, we need to set it so that it will receive something from the ISC bus, which is over here. I've left the channels as they are. We could be more specific and say channel 1. If we were, which we're not going to do, but if we were to have material that was on a separate channel, then we could name a particular channel. But right now it's just kind of quick and dirty, and we're just saying channel 1, but we're just saying listen to all of the channels. I've set the channel or the monitor to in. This is to avoid sort of putting it into record, because we could, if we put it into record, then we can record the MIDI notes that will be coming in. So that's how we could work with the pattern and generate some MIDI clips. So let's say we put that into record, but remember, they're not in sync. So you'd have to start it up, which is what we've got here. So those are the notes coming in as it's recording. So you can see that there's this kind of long note that's sort of hanging around. And that's really that's why I have these MIDI notes sort of off, all MIDI notes off, because this is just a stray hanging note. Not quite sure how to get rid of it at the moment, really. It doesn't annoy me too much, and I think it's something that I don't really appreciate, really, sometimes. We might need to make some small adjustments. Let me just fold that. So you can see it's just slightly over, I think. So if we then adjust the other side of the clip, someone's playing piano behind me. Adjust the other clip, and let's say that's round about there. So now, if we put that into auto, we've pretty much got a performance as it has come out with Sonic Pi. A little bit of editing to get them synced, or at least to tidy up the clip. But that worked. What you can also probably see is that there's a little bit of velocity changes that are going on here, and that's coming from the ring here, which is a velocity ring. So being able to also play the note and then specify a channel and then specify the velocity, and then the velocity is doing, something in terms of shaping it. Now, one of the things that we can also do is basically use the same MIDI input and stack some other instruments on there as well. So let's have a listen to these two instruments together. So this second instrument is actually more of a percussive one. Now we could simulate this in Sonic Pi. I think it's quite nice. And then you have them sort of layered together. And then I have a third instrument, which is this one. And just a little bit of panning. And then if we want to, you can just change different parameters. So with the change of the velocity, you can see that then you can assert another kind of a rhythmic framework on top of it as well. So as well as being able to control the sort of repetitive nature of the sequence, you can also superimpose another layer on top of that, which is here was the velocity one. So because the notes, the length of the notes ring is 8, and the note short ring is 2, and because 8 is divisible by 2, we get a pattern that's essentially stable and doesn't change. So by adding one more value, let's say 0, we can then create a more shifting pattern. So when we add a fourth value, let's say we enter 3. So it's because it's 8 and 4, divisible by 2, 8 is also divisible by 4, they end up in this sort of very regular, even, repetitive pattern. So this is kind of really a good place to be where you want it if you just want to have the code just running for a little bit. I find this one, when you do these kind of stable patterns, it's actually really nice when you limit the number of octaves. Put it into 5. Let's move it back to Lydian. Let's make that 4 and 2. We can hear the delays kind of shifting around from one of the instruments. But of course, if we knock off one of the values in either ring, currently we have the velocity ring is being selected by the look. So the look is essentially a way of it's related to the tick, and basically it looks at the ring and says, oh, okay, we're at position 1. Now we're at position 2. So it picks whatever the value is there and then plays that. But of course, we can also randomize it, and that's with the use of choose. So let's have a listen now with that. And this is it with no changes, just 0. And obviously the way that it's fluctuating is because of the velocity ring that's being used here. Let me take this one out. So no velocity change at all. Put it back in. So you can hear that in some of the Ableton instruments have got a little bit more velocity sensitivity to them. So there are some quite dynamic elements in play. But because of the nature of the ring, in terms of well, certainly in terms of choose, what we're getting now is a kind of a random selection from it. When we use, say, something like the look, I'm going to keep it just as a look, you can then assert another type of rhythmic kind of value in there, as it were. Let's have a listen. Let me do it as sequence 2. There we go. So if I change sequence 2 now to have another value, so it's 8 and 2, so it's a stable kind of rhythmic pattern. So we could make the one at the end there quite quiet. Let's make it 10. Make that one 1. So not only do we have, you know, a kind of a rhythmic aspect to up here in terms of the notes and the note short and the way that they interact together, we also have one down here which is a dynamic layer. Depending on which instruments we're using, let's try 0 again. Oh, actually, no, I should do a value. Put that one back to 127. So now you get that quite strong kind of downbeat. I think that one was about 100. I vaguely remember. So at the moment we've got it in 5s, but let's say that we had it in 6. Sorry. Wrong side of the bracket. Let's say we have it as 40, so now it's in 6s. So you've got 3 up here, 8 here, and 6 here. Because this is 6 and this is 3, a number that the 3 goes into 6. So we would need to, previously we only had 5 values. So we had 8 up here, 3 here, 5 here. We had a kind of a shifting piece. So if we turn this into 7. Need to increase the voices. Let's try increase the voices on each of these. One octave and C5. Here we go. I love the kind of the little hints of a counter melody that kind of come through. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed that, and it's pretty straightforward code in terms of being able to get Sonic Pi to pass information onto your DAW. It's essentially the same thing in every DAW. Okay, until next time, bye for now.